Chapter 7, The Flying Saucer People. Oh, getting into UFOs, are we? Einstein had just come home from the beach when his mother phoned him from her office at the Sparta Tribune. "I'm glad you're home, Adam," said Mrs. Anderson. I have a favour to ask you." "Sure, Mum," Einstein said. "What can I do for you?" Einstein liked to mix up his words. It was unfortunate he felt that nobody else thought it was funny. "Adam, there's someone coming to Sparta whom I want to interview for the newspaper. I'm going to invite him home for dinner this evening, and I'd like you to be around when I do the interview." "Who is he? And why do you want me to be around? Is there something wrong?" "His name is Mr. Janus," Mrs. Anderson answered. "He's writing a book about something that happened to him, or at least something that he claims happened to him." "What happened to him? What do you want me to do when he comes? Do you think he's not telling the truth? Is it something to do with science?" Einstein asked all the questions in a rush. "Hold on a minute and I'll tell you," his mother laughed. "Janus says he was walking along a country road just outside Sparta when he saw a flying saucer. The saucer landed and some little people with big heads came out and greeted him." "Wow!" Einstein exclaimed. "A close encounter of the third kind. What else happened?" "Janus says that the saucer people were able to talk to him in English with some kind of translation machine they carried. They asked him to go aboard their ship and took him to their base on the far side of the moon. They kept him there for a few days and then brought him back and released him." "That sounds really weird," Einstein said. "Do you believe his story?" "That's why I'd like you to be around," Mrs. Anderson answered. "He sounds sincere, but he may be just trying to get publicity for his book. I'd like you to listen to what he has to say and then tell me on the quiet whether he's made any scientific mistakes." Einstein readily agreed. He loved reading science fiction stories, though he had his doubts about flying saucers. Mr. Janus turned out to be a tall, thin man with sharp features. His eyes were black and piercing. All through dinner he talked about his experiences with saucer people. He said they were about 1 metre tall with a general shape of humans. They had a head, 2 arms and 2 legs. Their skin was a faint greenish colour and they seemed to glow. Their eyes were very round with no pupils, and their ears were pointed. Einstein listened closely, but he could not make up his mind one way or another. If you believed in saucers, he thought, then there was nothing scientifically wrong in anything Mr. Janus was saying. After dinner, Dr. Anderson said that he and Dennis would do the dishes. Dennis seemed to be about to protest, but Dr. Anderson gave him a look. Then Mrs. Anderson went into the den with Mr. Janus and Einstein and shut the door. "Would you carry on with your story, Mr. Janus?" asked Mrs. Anderson. "You just got to the part where the saucer people had given you spacesuit and you were walking on the moon." "Oh, the moon's surface was dusty and rocky," Mr. Janus said. "You know that there's no water or air on the moon. The temperature in the sunlight was over 100 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to boil water, if there was any. It's a good thing that the suit's air conditioning was working so well. The saucer people took me over to a hill, and when we got closer, I could hear a hammering going on behind the hill. It was not difficult climbing the hill because of the moon's low gravity. Did you see what was going on behind the hill? Asked Mrs. Anderson. Yes, answered Mr. Jonas. When we got to the top of the hill, I could see that the saucer people were knocking down part of their base. They asked me to tell the people of the world their reasons for leaving. They decided that the people on Earth were not advanced enough to be welcome in the Galaxy Federation of Intelligent Beings. That's too bad, said Einstein. But I can see why they felt that way, he thought. Mum, would it be okay if I went outside to play now? Would you excuse me for a second, Mr. Jonas? Asked Mrs. Anderson. I'll be back in a minute. Einstein and Mrs. Anderson went outside the den. Well, what do you think? Mrs. Anderson asked. Did Janus make any scientific mistakes? As far as I can tell, just one, Einstein said. But that mistake is enough of a whopper to make me think his whole story is fiction. Okay. We are up to, can you solve the puzzle? What was the scientific mistake in the story of the saucer people? What do we think? So it's got something to do with the sun on one side or the other. Let's see. And making it hot. Let's see. Was the mistake in his story that the temperature on the moon was hot enough to boil water? Mrs. Anderson asked. That seems wrong to me. I always thought the moon's surface was very cold. The moon's surface is either cold or hot, Einstein said, because the moon has no atmosphere. The surface temperatures are very extreme. In the shade, the temperature is higher than the hottest spot here. Then what was the mistake, Adam? The mistake that Janus made was connected with the lack of atmosphere on the moon, explained Einstein. Mr. Janus said that he heard a hammering going on behind a hill. Aha! Sound. But sound must travel through air to be heard. How could Janus have heard the sound of hammering in a place that has no air? Thanks, Adam. I knew I could count on you. Well, you can certainly count on what I expect to be in 2 years. What? Mrs. Anderson asked. 14, Einstein said. Don't press your luck, Mrs. Anderson said. Aha! No atmosphere on the moon. There we go. Therefore, sound can't travel. Okie doke. Back to that time of the night again. 4. Toilet, teeth, bed, then the light. 1, 2, 3. Night-night, darling. Love you. Bye.